I'll not say anything. Well, I said just one personal experience because I was a bachelor student when they made the compiler at a computing center in Oslo, together with the Reinsentralen. I was not working on that compiler, but Ole Johan Dahl hired me when he got some research grant. And when he had hired me as a research assistant, he asked me the central question, do you play an instrument? And I said, no. Not even the cello? No. Because he had a quartet. He was a very good pianist, and he wanted one violin and one cello to accompanying. So I don't even play the cello. Make my words. So, but now for the program, and the first to present herself, it's nice. The computing center had a female director when they made Simula. Now we have a female head of department head. It's Ellen Munthe-Kaas.
So, dear everybody, I'm happy to welcome you all to this celebration of the 50 years anniversary of Simula at the Department of Informatics in Ole Johan Dahl's house, which is very nice. We have some very prominent speakers today, which I'm eager to hear. So, how did it start? It started, well, sort of in the late 50s, but in the 1960-61, Kristen Nygaard was a research director at the Norwegian Computing Center, and he worked on ideas for a language that could naturally describe complex dynamic systems, a simulation language. And the background for this was that Kristen in the late 90s worked as a mathematician at the Norwegian Defense Research Establishment on so-called Monte Carlo simulations. These simulations at that time were done by hand and on early computers, and it was extremely cumbersome. When Kristen worked at the Norwegian Defense Research Establishment, he worked together with Ole Johan Dahl, who at that time underwent his compulsory military conscription at the so-called computing office. This was at a time when Ole Johan had completed his major in mathematics, so he was also a full-fledged mathematician. So when Kristen wanted to design this simulation language at the computing center, he involved Ole Johan. And in May 1962, they had the first specification of language, which was presented at the IFIP 62 World Conference in Munich in August, same year. And this language we often refer to as Simula 0. This was a simulation language, although the language definition as such probably never was quite stable. So Ole Johan went on working with the language, and he joined the computing center as a full-time employee in '63, and then Ole Johan and Kristen decided to build this further language on top of Algol. And by 1964 they had a well-defined language, and then implementation started. This involved a team of persons from the computing center. We should perhaps mention Bjørn Myrhaug and Sigurd Kubosch as some central persons there, but there were also other important persons. And the first compiler was finished already in '65, January of '65. And this language was called Simula 1. However, when they started using this language for different projects, Ole Johan and Kristen soon realized that the language could well be used for other programming tasks than simulation. So they started to explore what a more generalized version of it would look like, should look like. And the resulting language is Simula 67, presented at the IFIP TC2 conference in May 67, together with even further language ideas. And at the same time, the computing center signed a contract with Control Data to implement a compiler. And the language still was not finished, so they found out that they had to freeze the language, which resulted in the Simula 67 Common Base Language Report in 68. And in the spring of 69, the compiler or compilers were finished. Now, in the meantime, Ole Hahn was employed as a professor at the university. His professorship had the title Numerical Methods. A curiosity is that the first course he set down to design was called Non-Numerical Methods. In fact, de facto, he was then the first professor in computer science in Norway. And he was responsible for establishing research and education programs in the field. So he was paramount in building the curriculum and the establishing of this department, which had its birth in 1977. So we, as a department, celebrate our 40th anniversary this year. And of course, naturally, it followed that Ole Hahn brought Simula into the curriculum. So it was used as the starting programming language for students. And the lecturers doing these courses soon found out that this was actually a very excellent programming language for teaching purposes. So the department, we actually used Simula as the first language until 1998. And we were ridiculed by everybody for sticking to this so long. But I still feel that as a language for teaching programming, it was a really excellent choice. One curiosity more, in the early 70s, I think it was 71 to 72, Professor Donald Knuth from Stanford had 1 year sabbatical visiting Ole Hahn. He was at that time writing on his book series, The Art of Computer Programming. I think it was the second volume he worked on. Is that correct? Yes? And he was exposed to Simula and immediately saw the consequences and how well this language was, how good it was. And he wanted to take with him a compiler back to Stanford for educational purposes when he left. But he didn't have any funds for buying it. And the computing center did not want to give it for free, which was a pity. That was a really sad decision, because that meant that these ideas took much longer to reach out into the rest of the community than I think it otherwise would have happened. Okay, so Kristen, he also became a full-time professor at the department, not until '84, but he had then been a part-time professor here for some 5-6 years. So he was also a prominent person at the department and building up his curriculum. So the department has, to a very large extent, had good use of these strong personalities, and we are now a large department with 70 full-time scientific professors. This year, to illustrate how large we are, we have almost 2,000 enrolled students. We will educate, or we will have 35 more PhD students this year and 180 more master PhD candidates, I should say, and 180 more master candidates this year alone. So we are large. Ole Johan and Kristen were very different personalities. Kristen was outspoken. He took a lot of space, both verbally and by stature. While Ole Johan was slim and what I would say a fairly private person, although not more private than he and Kristen engaged in very loud discussions, and that was also the case later in Ole Johan's career. He always dived into debates quite heavily. So not shy, I would say, but private perhaps. And many say that it is maybe because of this difference in personality that Simula was such a success, because they really dived into the ideas and had thorough discussions. And people used to say that every morning Kristen came into the office and said, "Oh, I have this great new idea, we'll do it like this." And then Ole Johan picked the idea apart and threw it away during the day. But that is, of course, a very simple explanation, because I know that some of the ideas, Ole Johan, for instance, turned it upside down and found out if we do it like this, then it works. So it was, of course, a very full collaboration between the two. And so the question is, was Simula developed or discovered? And some say no, it was more likely derived, because they started out with some high level set of ideas, and dived into the details to try to see how these ideas should be realized. And through that process, they derived the proper pieces of what became the Simula language. So then I thank you all for coming, and I'm really happy to hear what the next speakers will say about their experiences and their view on object orientation as such, and Simula